I'm super excited because I have a clicker. And it works, which makes it even better. So, hi, hello everyone. I'm from the BBC. We have a giant team of about 120 UX designers. And I look after some of it, but not all of it, so don't get excited. I'm here to convince you that you can do more better user research than you currently do. You're going to be all like, yeah, but you've got 120 designers, so you can do anything you like. And the answer is no, of course we can't. So there's plenty of parallels, and I'm hoping that I can draw them out for you and give you things to think about. So me, I've been working at the BBC for 13 years, which is a bit upsetting. I started out as a design researcher and then just sort of dawdled around various projects. My job now is head of user experience and design. There's 6 people in total who do that job because we have a big team, so we slice it up and do different bits. I look after design research, user experience architecture, all the children's stuff like this, and all the knowledge and learning stuff, so that's like bite size. I wonder, which is a kind of factual thing for people who have stopped education but are still interested in things. And I also have this cool new thing that I do called One Service Development, which is where we go and try and talk to program making teams about how they can be more human-centered in their practices as well. So it's super interesting and incredibly difficult. So in terms of CBeebies and that in this sort of thing, what we're trying to do is complex interaction design for an audience that can't read. We're also trying to help them learn to read. So as you can imagine, it's a really super interesting part of my portfolio. But I'm really pleased that I got to take on the design research team. Design research is a different thing in the BBC than many places because we've been doing it for 80 years at this point. It started out as the listener research department, and it really took off during the war years. It became the government's main way of discovering the morale of the masses and how they might be able to communicate to them and help them through. So yeah, long history, but like Victorian plumbing has its own problems, having a long history. So the other thing is that's different probably from the rest of humanity, unless you work in public service, is that money works differently for us. We have funding in order to create quality, and then we try and measure the quality. So that bakes in user research methodologies kind of into our sole reason for existence. It makes it a very different part of the process for us than in a lot of places. It's not a nice to have. We have to try and kind of argue for the success of projects on the basis of quality. Ratings as well, but it's always on a balance between those two things. At the time, we started up with qualitative research because we couldn't fund quantitative research and the technology wasn't there for it. So we've got this long history of qualitative research, and quant's a bit new for us, and it's not architected in the way that you find in modern companies that started in the last 20 years. So this is the size of the team that I inherited in design research when I came back from maternity leave, including me. There were 6 of us, looking after a team of 120 people, which is one of the biggest teams in the UK probably. Only people like GDS and some of the big boys from Silicon Valley are really competing with that. And trying to have impact in that size is quite difficult. But not only that, these 120 designers, that feels like a lot of people, but you put that in the context of the BBC, it's actually quite small because that's how many employees we have. We have about 16,000. So design research is a tiny part of this. But not only that, those 16,000 employees actually make content which reaches, on a weekly basis, 97% of the UK population. And the estimate is something like 308 million households worldwide. So that's 6 people that I had at the start of that. Kind of needs to pack quite a large punch to have any impact on the total user experience that we might be able to create. The DG said, that's a very BBC thing to say. The Director General recently said that he wanted, that's a BBC thing to say as well. The guy who's in charge of the BBC recently said that he wanted the BBC to be internet first, which is super exciting for us because that's not the sort of talk we're used to in our neck of the woods. That's a way of saying all these TV people that have just kind of not really had to think about it very much, they have to start thinking about digital stuff now. So that makes me even more scared about my 6 people that have got to try and create human-centered processes for all of these people. What this talk is about, the reason it applies to you is because I'm sure everybody wants to have a larger impact than they currently do. And I'm sure that the things that I had to deal with are things that every organization actually has to deal with. If you deal with a couple of people, then you probably come up against some of these problems. Because actually, like, the strategy wasn't the hard part. That was relatively easy to kind of say, oh, well, we'll try and do this and do that. It was the human instincts and the way that people behave, their base reactions to things that got in the way of us being able to make big changes. And there were things like, you know, ruts and territory and, you know, a belief in a higher power that were really getting in our way to create better user research. So I wanted to change design research when I came in. And, you know, they were actually quite good. They were doing really well. They were respected. They were very competent, super rigorous. They cared enormously about what they were doing, very motivated team. However, that had its own problems. It meant that what was happening was that people were wanting to use them for everything. They were really overloaded. And as they became more and more overloaded, their ability to try and diversify, do new practice was diminished. They ended up using very similar processes every single time. They just got stuck in a rut of task-based, lab-based user research, which is expensive to run. It's a long lead time. It's difficult to manage. It tends towards people over-optimizing on their designs before they put it into a lab, so they polish and they fall in love with their thing, and then they get really angry with the results afterwards. It meant that the knowledge of that team was becoming more and more patchy because they didn't have the capacity to go out and discover new methodologies or try out new things. And in the meantime, they were really busy, so their morale was starting to go downhill, and they were feeling kind of angry and resentful that people didn't respect them more. You know, there's just all this stuff was boiling away. So I wanted to improve all of that. So the first thing I did was I ran and did a bunch of stakeholder interviews. I talked to the design research team, I talked to the UX team, and broader into the product and development. And the general sort of response was, well, we love them, but, you know, it's not, can't really make it change, can we? It's not really, you know, it's just impossible. The other thing that was bothering me was, like, why did I only have 6 design researchers if they were so popular? It just seemed ridiculous to me. And then it became obvious that actually I didn't have 6 design researchers. I had potentially 120 design researchers. I could cannibalize everyone in the team to be part of this and increase the amount of effort that we could put into design research. Obvious. So I applied a service design escalator type model into this, retrospectively. I didn't think about this at the time. And what I wanted was to get people from, I don't do design, this is the UX designers. I don't do design research up to, it is my job. It's definitely part of my job. It's pretty easy to work out what the steps towards participation will be. You know, it's not really the problem. You can kind of go, oh, well, someone attends design research, and then after that, maybe they take notes, and they start designing it. They help with the admin. They get more involved in how the materials are prepared and integrate that into the practice. And then maybe up here, they start doing sessions themselves and participating in that. And by then, they're running them themselves with a bit of help from a specialist. And maybe some of them will actually transition up into becoming design researchers and wanting to get into that specialism full time. That's not the problem. What's the problem is the unseen barriers. So, you know, you've got drivers, but you've also got whatever the opposite of a driver is, a depressor, a decelerator, something. So these unseen barriers were the ones that I needed to fight. And they were the sort of things that would have been very familiar to someone sitting in a mammoth skin in a cave. Normal stuff that we're all used to. And the first of these is territory. It's a basic survival instinct to respect territory. You know, it means that there's enough food for everybody. You stay on this side of the valley, I'll stay on that side of the valley, and we won't have to kill each other. And, you know, you just meet when you're trading or having sex. What does that look like now? It's passive-aggressive comments. It's post-it notes in the milk cartons in the fridge. It's, in the case of design research team, they were going, oh, who did that research? Okay. Next time, can you talk to me about it beforehand? That would be great, thank you. That sort of behavior. And that was really stopping people from coming in and going, hey, I want to do design research. They just obviously, there was an obvious barrier. These people are the specialists, it's their job. It's not my job, I'm not allowed. It's a bit like the design research team were being security guards at the front door of a building and deciding that the best way to keep the building safe is by having it empty. Fine, but it doesn't really operate as a building anymore. It kind of looked like that, instead of our nice participation ladder that we had before. Respecting territory meant that people had a lack of context, they weren't sharing, there was loads of duplication happening, they'd have exactly the same research happening in 2 different parts of our product portfolio. And there was just too few people to do the work in that sort of way. And the only way is by being more porous and open. So that's the first one, keep off the grass. Second one, back to the campfire. How do you get good at a job? It's not a real question. I'm going to do the answer as well. You fit in with the rules that you see. If you want a nice toasty space at the campfire, you start learning fairly quickly that you don't turn up naked, you don't fart, because people don't like that. You do what you need to do to fit in and get used to those rules, and you don't always know why you're doing the things that you're doing. So, you know, you fake it until you make it. Now, if you're... You know, so if your caveman friend is not eating the green berries, but is eating the purple berries, you might go, oh, well, that's probably because they'll give me a stomachache. But it might be that you go, well, that's because if I do eat them, I'll get impaled by the invisible unicorn. It's possible. It's unlikely, but that's the sort of thing. You're making assumptions to understand the world around you and not asking the questions. And in the same way, these false assumptions start turning up in this problem. We'd have people starting to say, design research is not my job, because no one else was doing it, and they were copying everyone else. It was nothing to do with the reality. It was nothing to do with what it said in the job description, or what their line managers were saying, or anything like that. It was just, they'd looked around them, no one else was doing it, so of course it's not my job. Another one of these invisible unicorns is that you do research in order to tick the box on your project plan that says do research. That definitely happens quite a lot as well. So that's the second one. The third one is, we all like to be liked, don't we? We really like liking things. That's why social media is doing so well. We like things, we collect likes, we might even start taking a thing down that hasn't been liked enough. And we choose things and people and companies that we like, and we narrow our view on the world all the time. And, you know, I found myself recently, someone put a joke on my Facebook saying, my Facebook, you see, because I'm very old. They put on a kind of off-colour refugee joke, and so I muted them. And then I was like, I've just narrowed my experience of the world. I didn't feel comfortable about that. It was like, I didn't like it, but you shouldn't like everything, should you? So what I'm talking about, obviously, is confirmation bias. When we go into research, we want it to be liked. We've made a thing. We want people to say yes, and we're going like this, and waiting for them to say yes. So, of course, that barrier was there as well. And you start actually saying, well, I won't put something in front of them in case they say something nasty. So there was resistance to getting that feedback at the right time. You know, in this design test build runs thing that we all have, and like sometimes agencies like do a trademark on it, and then I do laughing. Well, the furniture is there, but do we use it? So, you know, it's supposed to be an iterative cycle. In practice, we do a test, and we build something else, and we run it, and then we do a test. But did we actually take the other thing down or go, oh, yeah, that was broken? Not always, no, because you're kind of doing the test to get like that. So the other thing is that I think this comes from the fact that we all like the idea of something being right first time. And we congratulate each other when it is right first time. We say, yeah, that was brilliant. You did that really quickly, and it's perfect. And I think that's why we like God, because he just made the whole world in 7 days, and he didn't get anything wrong. Brilliant. So I think it's totally intrinsic to our society. We have stories, we love making things, we like the idea of stuff being made, and we mythologize it, and we tell stories of heroes who are brilliant at doing it. And that is what the TV industry absolutely is powered by. You watch it on programs, like, I don't know, people, angry people smashing glasses and they're making a brilliant thing and everyone goes, oh, aren't you brilliant? So this idea of the single creative vision, this one person who just comes up with something and pow, it's perfect. We love that. And it's terrible. It's terrible for us. It's so corrosive because that's not how the world works. And the moment you start looking at the best artistic endeavors, they're incredibly iterative and they're incredibly thoughtful. They've got process for a reason. They're iterating all the time. But that's not the myth that we like to perpetuate. And the lies that we tell each other are around this, are around the ability to create straight away. So that's God, yeah! Last one, and then I've got to do the other, it's a long talk. The other thing is we get into ruts, and this is another survival instinct, because obviously it's about pattern matching. You can go tree, 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 there's a snake in there, like that, because you can spot that that one's different from the other ones. We like a rut, and it helps us with shortcuts. It helps our brain act quickly and stupidly. And we feel comfortable. So, I know that every Christmas there's going to be some weather presenter standing on a roof somewhere saying, oh, isn't it a white Christmas? And I kind of like that. I enjoy that. I like the fact that it's January, and I know that in December I'll be having a Christmas sandwich at about 10 p.m. at night that has all of the courses in it, including the cheese and pudding, like that. It's January, and I know that now, because I like a rut. We all do. And that's this process again. Find ourselves in this rut, but you can just find yourself mindlessly doing this without necessarily hitting the right layer. You might be testing entirely the wrong thing. You might be optimizing into oblivion. You don't know where you are because you might not be asking the right question to begin with. So that's bad ruts. You can't fight human instincts, but you can bend them to your will. This is where our service design model might help us, because you can start counteracting some of these with the opposite side of the coin. So the first thing is good habits. If you can have an iterative process that sits there mindlessly being carried out, then you can make it a good iterative process, and you can make sure that the tropes are familiar and what we want to see. So one of the things that we did very quickly was, it seems like a very boring thing, but it was super helpful. We consolidated all of the external spend into one pot. Now, if you're at the BBC or any other large organisation, there's lots of pots and they're all like that. By doing that, we could see how much we were spending, and we could immediately spot the duplication. So that helped us straight away start to get an overview on what was actually happening. And that just became a normal thing for everyone immediately, because I could just say, you have to come through me to sign this off. And I always did. I always signed it off. They didn't notice that. But it just meant that they knew that there was a process they had to sit into, they had to work into. Then we made rapid research methods available to everyone very quickly, because we could consolidate. We could say, we're running rapid sessions and they're across multiple products. So sport and news and iPlayer and children's were all in the same work package for us. So we could procure it once, which saved us loads of time. But it also meant that anyone could grab a slot at any time. It became much more flexible. And the rapid research methodology was really just a replacement for the longer task-based, lab-based user research. So we were kind of swapping in like for like. The difference was just in the time. We took out the lead time for recruiting users because we just made a plan for that in advance, and sort of went, well, we'll broadly get in people like that, and did that. And then what you could do is get a slot from a design researcher. Then you've got, basically, that is one day, get materials together. And then these two are the second day. You do the research and the analysis all in one day. And it also encouraged everyone to be in the room together because it was part of the method. So, so designers came in, they watched the sessions. As the sessions were going on, they were carrying out analysis on the whiteboard behind them. So they started grouping themes, and they could have results and put it back into their process on the Monday. That speed made it much easier to get people involved in research, and it was just a lower cost to entry. And then there was an issue around permission to join, as we said. Keep off the grass problems. That required an intervention, and it was a one-off thing. First of all, I had to tackle the design research team because, passive-aggressive, bit of a problem. So we did a workshop, nice bipolar chart, love them. In this case, what we were doing is I asked them to do a kind of offload, all the stuff I have to do in my life, type post-it notes, all the different types of job that they had to do on many, many post-it notes, and then organize it against things that they considered to be important strategically, and then things that they wanted to do, things they didn't want to do, things that they found demotivating and rubbish, things that they found super exciting and interesting. And then those quadrants, we could identify what we did with all those bits of work. So the first one over here, if it's important, but you don't want to do it, we've got to find someone else to do it. Be fine, find someone. This is stuff that we know is important, we want to do it, so that's easy. Why on earth would you be doing something that's not important and that you don't want to do? It's surprising how much stuff was in that corner. It tended to be, this was the moral high ground corner. Oh, well, if I don't do it, no one will do it, and it's rubbish, isn't it? But anyway, my life. So that was really easy to get rid of. That was great. And the session was about permission to do that. And this was the prize. If you manage to get rid of this half, you get to do this stuff, because right now there isn't time. And that was stuff like submitting conference papers, trying out new methodologies that we weren't sure if they would work, stuff like that. So that was the fun stuff, and that was the motivation to actually do the rest of it and kind of get on board with, big gulp, but yes, you're right, I'll trust someone else to do that. So for example, the offload stuff, that was a lot of the task-based user research, and that's when we brought the rapids in, because that allowed us to say, this is the way we can do all of that. That's a mechanism for that. A lot of the stuff around just boring admin procurement stuff, we just said, well, we'll streamline that and make it easier. Still in the process of doing that, and I'm re-procuring the roster at the moment to make it even easier, hopefully. And then the next thing was to tell the team, the larger team, that research was part of their job. So we had an away day. We brought everyone together in Manchester. You'll be pleased to know that the venue was free to us, so your license fee was not wasted on that. It was, what we did was, a morning was a speaker just talking about an integrated user experience and research practice, how to use research as a form of inspiration, rather than just, well, it's the thing you do at the end once you've got an idea and you want to test it, turning it into, no, it's an upfront, it's a source for your practice, you need it. And then the second half of the day, we built a giant A/B testing machine out of cardboard, and then made everyone go through it, and then did live visualized results. So that was just a kind of opportunity for people to test, to get the idea of how quickly you could produce something that could be tested, show the results as part of the method, and just kind of reinforce some of the stuff about the kind of rigor that we wanted. So the main message of that was research is inspiration. It's not this thing you think it is. It's not the end. So then we had permission to join. The next thing was to get in scientific rigor. So rather than it just being doing a test, not looking at the answers, doing another one, we had to get into there is a hypothesis, there is a question that you're having. But on a much simpler level, as a designer, you design like you're right, but you test like you're wrong. You have to pivot within yourself. It's not a case of I can outsource the people who say it's wrong to someone else. I can make that someone else's problem. Because in the process of doing that, what you're doing is bifurcating your practice. You're saying, oh, it's not worth bothering with that bit. And then you can have a fight with that person, which is stupid. You can sit there and go, well, I love it, and I will now defend it while you tell me why it's wrong. That's a bad dynamic to get into. But if it's inside your own head, then you can't really do that anymore. So this is the same as any creative practice. You have a moment where you open up and you go, diverge, make things, try stuff out, converge, decide the things that work, chuck out the stuff that's rubbish. It's obvious, but again, in the face of different people's jobs, it became sort of weird and crusted over. And you remember this cycle and the onion. What we're trying to get to is more like Darwin's tree of life. So it should be evolutionary rather than, creation myth. The idea that you have multiple things and you're trying to kill them as you go, and you're coming up with slightly new things and then trying to kill them as you go. It's much more healthy. It's much better. You don't end up with this weird sort of string of We're actually just optimizing on the same problem, but we haven't dragged ourselves out of that. This is really hard, though. Now, all the time trying to remember you need to diverge, you need to converge, you need to question the basis of what you're doing. And frankly, you don't have the resources to do as much of it as you need to. So it's a question of how can you do that in a small scale all the time? How can you make sure that you're being honest about what your measures are, for example? Have a hypothesis and then test it and then actually be honest about whether it's a yes or a no. And celebrate it when it's a no, because we don't celebrate failure. We only celebrate success. Actually, it's really great if we can start celebrating failure. Saying, we killed an idea. Ideas are cheap. I've had loads today. Most of them are terrible. So, and then the final thing is community. So rather than having this sort of, you did it wrong, it's difficult to get up here, so don't bother. Well, this was helpful to us. So sprints, the Google Sprints thing, this was about a year and a half ago, and the BBC was very excited about sprint methodologies and jumping up and down. It's where the cool kids were, the cool guys were doing sprints, and everyone was like, oh, I never get to do a sprint. So we could just attach our design research into the sprint methodology, and then everybody wanted to do it. It was part of the cool gang, so great. And then we also created, off the back of that big day that we had, we created a design research champions network. So we said, if you're interested in this, extra interested, just tell us. And we put them all on a mailing list and kind of did some extra stuff and gave them training and said, you now are a design champion for your team. Come and you have to help them through this. And you've got, loads of access to the design research specialist, but you're on the ground doing it. So we kind of gave them permission to set themselves up for that. So we just tried to make it a party at the top of the escalator. That was the thing. It starts feeling like somewhere you want to go. I think the thing we need to do now is extend it beyond UX, because we're in a massive organization. We've just bitten off as much as we can chew, really. But in practice, of course, it should be cross-functional. It's not really just a UX thing. I think, and the thing that is exciting to me at the moment is the idea of spreading human-centered practice everywhere. There's no reason why it needs to be digital even. So we've got all the drivers in place, we've got the party. The issue for us now is that new people are always joining, and we haven't had this big intervention recently, so we've just got to try and keep the home fires burning with this idea, keep that going. And so the work continues. But in terms of the outcome for us, there's been plenty of gains. So money, it saved us loads of money. Since we consolidated the budget, I can't use the numbers because very secret. But in practice, it's halved the amount of money that we spend externally on design research. And we're doing significantly more design research now than we were then. Partly because internal research costs us 10% of running it totally externally. We just need to pay for the users. We've got labs internally. We've got one in Salford and one in London. But even if we didn't, mobile lab kit is really easy. And it's very, very accessible to anyone with a phone at this point. So that's no excuse, really. And then in terms of medals, being a design research champion has been conflated with career progression. It makes a difference to how well you do. And we've actually had our first person move across from being a research champion into being a research specialist now. So that's happened, and they're in place doing that full time because they enjoy it. And it's been great for morale because we've been nominated for Market Research Society Award for Best Internal Team and stuff like that. And frankly, we've got the time to apply for awards like that now. So, it's that's actually a possibility to us. So that's the end. This is the summary. Try and form good habits, welcome people in, encourage scientific thinking, and make it a party. That's the end.